And so tonight, I know Ray's Assistant Town Manager Santilli suggested that Facilities Director Steve Foster go first. So Steve, we're all yours for the CIP.
Good. Just by way of introduction, a few new faces. My name's Steve Foster, Facilities Director, and hopefully meet here at some point after the meeting, maybe. Looking forward, 2017. The current budget you have in front of you is a continuation of our efforts to have some, includes funding for some major capital improvements or repairs. Previous and current items include things such as roofing, building envelope, HVAC, boilers, life safety systems, hot water heaters, etc. Current requests that you have in front of you now, high concentration of roofing items you might see in the spreadsheet in front of you.
Page 20?
Yes.
Primarily due to the inclusion of a large library roof replacement that is needed. That roof is in need of repair. That money, I mentioned $110,000 plus some monies I set aside from prior years. Capital accounts from facilities would go towards that roof replacement. The alternative funding for the library also being sought from CPA, but that is going through its own approval cycle. Any fundings replaced that roofing requests, behind that would be mechanical and plumbing, rooftop units, etc. That would be backfilling that spot left by the roofing funding coming from other sources. Basis for the current requests are pretty much a continuous monitoring of our buildings, frequent inspections, watching the maintenance reports come back, both internally and externally from vendors and contractors. Updating a work plan which I have created for each building that identifies those items that we have to do immediately, those that could be deferred, and those which are out and deferred to years ahead. So that's done on an annual basis, so we have a good look going forward. As I mentioned, regular site visits to these locations, keeping up to speed with what's happening out there. And I think this budget reflects some of that, in that the more you look, the more you see. And it's identifying some of those needs going forward. And I believe this gives us a sustainable position on keeping these capital items in good shape.
Steve, how many buildings are on your list?
There's 20 buildings on our list. It's gonna tick up just shy of 1 million square feet.
So as a hesitation of breaking good vibes, although it is starting to snow, we've got these things planned for next fiscal year. What happens this winter if we get a tough winter? How does that impact this?
It changes.
Well, a tough winter might affect some building envelope items primarily. Any of these here would make a roof situation maybe deteriorate further. So the winter does a number on these membrane roofs. So I try to catch them seasonally, so watch them after the winter, particularly last winter. Pay close attention to looking at these roofs and see what kind of damage occurred. And I think that's where someone, like the library, took more of a beating last year, because it was already on the bubble, and I think last year it really tipped it over the edge here. We need that roof replaced. So that's an example of what a tough winter can do. The other item is that your building envelope, your siding, your cladding can sometimes take a beating on that too. So it's another item to pay attention to, make sure the winter's okay. Take a look at it in April, right after the season.
Steve,
I was going to say, if I can, Tara. So this is basically a general guideline. If everything stays status quo, Steve has done his assessment of the 20-some-odd buildings. If nothing jumps out, if no emergency happens, this is what he's going to do. Obviously, if all of a sudden we have a roof collapse, a boiler goes, something of that nature, he reprioritizes this list. But he also has some, Steve has basically two pots of money. He has a small pot of money as part of his operating budget, and then he has his CIP. Well, what he doesn't use in the CIP carries over from one year to the next. So as he alluded to, he has some leftover savings. So again, if everything falls into place, Steve has developed a plan. These are the projects he'll do with the 225. If he can do more, he will. If something pops up, he'll have to reprioritize what this schedule of items are.
And I think that's good to hear, because I would think one of the other concerns that just in general, we would have, if you think about all these facilities as your own home, is that where's the balance between deferred maintenance?
Right.
When does that start to tip the scale towards?
Correct.
It's a daily triage.
Okay.
You look at it and there's a problem coming at you every day, and you look and say, well, I can defer that a little bit.
Yeah.
But this other thing I can't defer. That's when it comes up to, okay, this may be moved to the top, the other one goes down a couple notches, and that's probably daily that happens.
But even
You
with
reassess.
maintenance, a boiler can go
Oh, yeah.
without
Right.
notice or something, he has to address it.
Oh, I noticed that on one roofing proposal, it may be the Atkinson School, I don't know which one it is. The proposal has us building over the existing roof. Yeah, it's a flat roof,
Correct. Parts of Atkinson are flat and parts are pitched.
pitched,
So
and so
it's
it was
combination.
flat and pitched, and so by pitching it, then you eliminate that pooling of the water on the flat membrane, which is getting into the insulation. That would be Atkinson.
Yeah.
The other,
Are you referring to the ponding of what might occur on a flat
the
roof?
ponding that occurs
Yeah.
and the perforations in the rubber underlayment. We have lots of flat roofs apparently everywhere. So when I looked at the
The standard municipal school building.
yeah, exactly. So when I look at the Atkinson thing about, putting the roof over that part, I'm thinking, well, would it be possible, feasible, or whatever, and I'm sure you've thought about it, doing the same thing with some of these things that we're patching now. I know we're patching a bunch of roof repairs on page 20, because we're running around putting some goo here and some goo there. But as a standpoint, at some point, making a shed roof someplace, I don't know whether that works, whether it doesn't work, and what kind of a pitch. I owned a deck house with a 4 and 12 pitch, and that developed like ice dams.
Well, most of the issues with municipal and school buildings are the infrastructure that's on top of the building, HVAC units or whatever.
So you have to build around them.
So, right, so a pitched roof, installing a pitched roof over a flat roof is most often than not feasible, because of what's on the roof. And the stuff gets put on the roof in order not to be put in the building. You need space in the building, so you put the mechanicals up on the roof.
Well, it'd be a nice sight screen in addition, shedding water, but anyway,
I
that's
thought, Bill,
just
you
my
had
thought.
delivered, you had
I'm
pizza
sure
on it
you
for
thought
very.
about that.
You can't do that, it becomes a price point because you're building another structure above the
Yes,
structure. It
that's
becomes
right.
expensive.
And
And I've
it's,
done it
the
before.
weight
And then you have to
take
worry
on
about what's in the
engineering.
what's in the middle. What happens if something happens in the middle that you can now not see?
Yes, exactly.
Typically, what we strive for is not to change the structure in any great way, but to provide enough pitch on that roof system so the water runs to drain.
Mm.
So you don't have.
But not always possible.
Mm-mm. No.
The drains don't clog.
Right.
Then you get,
Yeah, correct.
you have other problems, all right, so maybe we shouldn't be building any more flat roofs.
Well,
Well, again, the nature of the building kind of defines it.
Okay, don't say that. I
Steve,
see,
how
okay.
much did you spend last year of your allotment? So how much what's the carryover?
I have held off on that, put aside $150,000 out of last year's and prior year's budget for going towards the library. So that's what's going to be added to the 110 that you see in front of you to address the roofing issues. So I've spent up to those limits.
Okay.
So that's gonna be part CPI and part community
CPA.
preservation,
Correct.
CPA. That's right.
There is an
Correct.
application that the library will submit to CPA for funding.
Mhm.
I believe they're gonna meet in January sometime with the committee.
Mhm.
And I've given some guidance and recommendations on that, to that extent. So I don't know what they are intending on funding at this point.
Steve, if you could wave a wand.
Is in
what-
addition
what-
to.
And say,
He'd hit the lottery tomorrow night with
Yep.
$50 in the town of North Andover.
Right.
Is that Shangri-La enough?
Yes,
Karen?
right.
So,
What would your wish list be?
Wish list date.
so Steve, clarification, go ahead.
No, I I gotta think on a wish list a bit, you know, that's a long story.
You're getting them off the hook.
Go ahead.
No,
Is the 150 you mentioned carry forward to this year, does that mean you plan on spending 375, or you plan on spending 225, of which the 150 is?
Yeah, I'm aiming to get, I think that flat roof repair estimate was like 350, as I remember my math, but don't hold me to the numbers on the
It says
engineer's
350
report.
here, yeah.
So when you add all these together, okay, between the prior year's encumbrances, this money,
It would be the
close to
one,
that
it would be the
target number.
150 plus.
So it's 375 is what we'd be
Right.
looking to spend in the current, coming
For the
fiscal year.
flat roof
For the flat-
repair, yes.
Okay.
You make a reference to reports like McBree, is that one of the ones that you might be looking at?
That's, I think that's the report for the high school roof is,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But they're not attached here, right? Do you usually
Yeah,
attach
no, the
them?
book would, if we attached everything that they give us as backup material, this book would be about 4 inches thick.
Yeah, that, as a structural engineer, I had looked at this condition and made some recommendations to the repairs. I have it in my files, and it involves what is some, clevis type, structural hangers that are on the canopy roofs, at the high school.
So hold on a minute, did I miss something here? So we're gonna do the 225 plus the 350 on the Atkinson roof?
No,
No,
the
Atkinson-
library, they were talking about the library roof.
Okay.
Susan.
Atkinson
Okay,
is
because-
taking a different path, that's
Yeah.
in the,
No, she misinterpreted, that's the
Okay.
that's the library.
right.
Okay, cause I'm seeing $225,000 worth of repairs here.
Right, but he has carryover from other CIP previous
Right.
years in the total of 150.
So that's
That he
Okay.
wants to put
375.
towards the library roof.
Right, I saved those aside, I haven't spent those yet.
Okay,
Looking-
but we have a bunch of pictures here that are Atkinson, right?
No, that's one of the
Which
listed
is-
projects.
Yeah, and that's
Okay, and
for,
that's out another year
Out,
or so, couple of years, and actually, I looked at last year's.
No, it's on, the Atkinson's down at the bottom.
Right. but
Emergency
not-
lighting.
Right, that's just 10,000.
Right.
Yeah, that's just
Right,
lighting.
yeah, it's a
Right.
that's a non.
But we've got a lot of information here on the
I
Atkinson
believe what you're
school.
looking at, it's a,
Yes,
The
the
Garland
pictures
report?
of the sod,
Garland.
Atkinson,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
roof.
Right, we've got, and then
Amazing
we've
the
got a
things
quote
stand
here, I think I saw a quote of 350,000. No, here's the one, that actually, these are for the out years.
right.
Yeah, there's 220, what, the standard would be a request of 225 each year. And
Right.
some of these projects will be multiple
Yeah,
year
I think
projects.
Except I think
Could
that
be
there
part of-
is,
I don't know.
in one
yeah,
of
that is
the
on a different track.
CIP budget,
Accurate.
there's like 450.
Yeah.
Took this
In a future year.
Yeah.
Correct.
So 225 this year, we've got all the information for the out years. But we are gonna use this other 150 for the library roof.
Correct, the 150 I set aside from prior years.
Yes,
Exactly.
110.
the school department has 464 in FY19 for the
Exactly.
Atkinson roof.
Right, which is the
Right.
Garland roofing report you have in
Right.
your
Okay.
handout, your booklet.
Which is what you must be looking at, Susan.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Correct.
And so we are not seeing anywhere here, right, the.
No, because that's in
library
FY19,
No, but the
which,
library roof.
you do see the library
The
roof
study,
on the list.
Susan?
You mean the
It's not on
engineering
here.
report?
No, it's not here.
Yes, it is.
This is only 225,000.
No, I understand, not the full amount, it's a
Okay.
multiple year project,
Oh,
of which,
okay.
it's really $800,000 or something in that area.
You're all in. on
If you're all in
cases.
on all the different they have 3 different roofs on the library.
Okay.
So to go all in from day one, it's about $800,000. So we're allocating approximately 2 something for the first year, plus whatever we might get from CPA. So if all of a sudden CPA says, I'm gonna give you $600,000, then we'll be able to do it all in year 1.
Yeah.
And then so basically, we would sort of package it up and look at it as like a combination effort. There's
Correct.
a regular roof from the new addition that was added. I don't know the history
Yeah,
of
I
the building.
don't-
A flat
but-
roof, Bill.
I just
Yeah.
know
Flat
that
roof.
there are 3 separate roofs.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's a clay tile roof, which has some issues that we need to address as well.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
the older red
Front of
clay
the
that you
building
see.
facade.
Right, and that's,
Pitched roofs.
and that has historical value because that was put up as part of the original
Correct.
building.
That's
And so
correct.
that's why it's eligible for historic preservation funds.
Right.
So, in a sense, it's kind of, it's a nice balanced
Right,
strategy
if we
to
can get the
address
pots
it.
of the pie to do it all, then we
Right.
will. If we can't, then we'll do it as a 2 or a 3 year project.
Right, because some years you know, some years we spend our historical preservation amount, and other years we.
That's correct.
we
All
simply-
depends on what applications they get by
Right.
the end of January.
Right, because remembering that the CPA, we have to spend a certain percentage in each category,
A minimum.
a minimum each year, and if we don't spend it, we have to set it aside for use in that particular category.
That's correct.
So in a sense, you know, if we haven't been spending our money in some of these areas, it would make sense to balance that out.
I think you're right, historical preservation usually gets fully allocated each year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there's quite a kitty in there.
In historical preservation category?
Oh, not historical preservation.
Affordable
Yeah.
housing
Yeah.
has the,
Right.
has the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
You know, overall, there's a
Correct.
very big kitty.
I think the challenge here that we're all, that I think we're feeling in the table is, we're dealing with a budget here, and when we get that, but there's not a place that kind of says, here's the whole picture. In other words, it's gonna take $800,000 to fix the library roof. And I think it's sort of, I think that's the thing that's a little frustrating within this format. And I don't know how to solve that, but I think that's kind of what we're feeling, which is, that's great if we're able to use all these pieces, awesome. But just kind of give us the full price. It's like going, you know, buying at the counter going, well, here's your final price, but you got there because you got 20% off, you're a loyal customer, it's Tuesday, you know.
I agree, but we don't know those answers yet.
Right.
But
Well-
we're committing to a project that ultimately involves having those answers. So I guess, I don't know where the end line is yet, but we're going to spend somewhere in that neighborhood, what you're telling me, to fix the roof of the library in a foreseeable period. And I guess I would say, if we could have parallel to this, something that sort of gives us a picture of that, I think it's easier for then people to really understand the investment we're making in our buildings, what it takes to run them. Because in some ways, you short shrift yourself in what it takes. In some ways, you really you're under projecting what it really takes to run that. And that can be a dangerous thing in different times.
Well, it's a balancing act. And yeah, it would be great to know everything up front, but all we can tell you is that we're gonna get the project done. Over the course of 1, 2, or 3 years, the project is going to get done.
So when are you planning on starting the project? Because again, I have to agree.
Well, any funding
That you get this year, you'll hold on to for the following, for the
well,
next
no,
year.
any funding doesn't take effect till July 1st of 2016.
Right,
That's
you
day
know,
one.
I meant 17, fiscal year 17.
Right, but that doesn't stop us. Usually what happens on kind of major projects, we do it, you know, I'll take the town hall renovation project. When town meeting approves the funds, we start working on that project the next day. So we're not waiting till July 1st to start.
Yeah.
So what's town meeting, May
May 10th.
12th or 10th or
Yeah.
something like that? If it's on May 10th and it gets approved, we're starting to work on May 11th. We'll start drawing out the specs and putting out the bid and whatever. So as close to July 1st as possible, when the funds become available legally, we can do the work.
So tell me, I understand, so you plan on spending the $110,000.
Plus the 150.
So to your point, why didn't we spend the 150 the current year?
Because, again, go back to one of my answers to Chris originally, it's all a matter of prioritization. You know, we do, as Steve's term, we do daily triage. Some things we have to do immediately, other things we can put off because something else comes up. It's no
Well,
different the way we approach the 5-year plan.
I have to
We
say
try,
that.
we try to lay out the 5-year plan for you, and we try to stay with it. But that doesn't mean all of a sudden in year 2 or 3, we go, oh crap, we have to make a change.
Well, just a
But you
minute
could
though.
just
You-
give us
you
another
get-
sheet
the-
that would basically be just a few scenarios. Like,
Mhm.
this is
Right.
how we think, this is how one way it could go, this is another way. So we can see it's 850,000, it's gonna happen over this number of years, it
Mhm.
might be 2, it might be 5 years. And here's our different funding options of how we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Because, cause the other thing is, if you're saying you've got the 150 from last year, I guess what probably happened was there was so much triaging, there was so much little repair that the whole 150 that was in building maintenance for last
Right.
year didn't get used, cause there were too many other things to do.
Plus, he had some operating money that he got to use too.
So let me suggest, if you, we have this facilities master plan, we know what's on that master plan.
Correct.
We know the buildings that are in the plan, we know the projects that are gonna be built, they're scheduled out over a time period. Sometimes they get shuffled.
Yes.
And, you know, that happens. So what I would suggest is taking your 27 buildings,
20 some odd, yeah.
right, and doing the same thing. Putting them on a spreadsheet, noting their particular deficiencies, and
He has.
then
He has.
juggling.
Those are all, he has done an assessment of each building,
But-
and they're actually on our webpage. You can actually go and look at Steve's assessment of each building.
So when you make your presentation to us, that's something that would be very helpful to have, and as a handout,
That's quite a.
or
each-
in our book.
Each building has probably 20 some odd pages.
But here's the thing,
Oh,
I'm new,
no.
and
Yeah.
so there's one page here for 2017, for 225
I-
in this packet.
Okay,
I know
yeah.
you may not know. so
I don't know what
I'm
you're
gonna
looking
tell
at,
you-
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
Just say
all right?
page 20.
Okay,
But
page
it-
20.
Page 20, sorry. So it would be nice if there was another page for 18, another page for 19, another page for 20 and 21. So that's 5 pages, and this 2017 lists all the different things in the tentative costs.
Yes.
Can you just add 4 more pages?
Oh, that's a good idea.
And let me step in. I mean, I may be biased because I work in facilities. So in a sense, there are a lot of different competing priorities sort of year over year. And some of it's a process of discovery. It's like I have a problem with the roof. Maybe it's a $10,000 problem. I mean, we all see this in our houses. You don't really know until someone gets up there and starts pulling, the membrane up and looking at what's under and, crawling through the walls and so forth. So it might be a process of discovery over a few years, in which case, would we come back every year and say, well, you didn't do this and this? I think it's fair to say, what did we get done last year? What are our priorities for next year, like we're doing? And it would be nice to see a list, maybe just a list of projects that have to go on in rank order, like we see on the regular CIP, so that
Yeah.
we can say that in terms of priorities, these are the 20 projects on the list. We're going to try to hit 10 this year.
I think we could do that probably for 2 years and maybe
Right.
3. I don't think we can go as far as 5
good.
years.
I-
And
I-
that's
But
really,
that's better than 1.
yeah, I understand. Okay.
And what might be anticipated funding from previous unspents?
Yep,
and, you know,
yep,
Or
yep.
possible CPA or whatever,
It's cliff notes to that huge
Yeah,
document.
no, I understand, yeah.
It's just
Okay.
such a big, 800,000 on a library roof. It's just like,
No, but again,
it's a big number,
Yeah.
It's-
Mhm.
but I think it puts more justice and service to what you're doing, Steve.
Mhm.
Because this sort of, is kind of small, and you don't see the rest of that, so
Yeah,
I think it
again,
would be
think
helpful.
phasing, I agree with you, what you're saying, and in discussion with Andrew about this, he said, okay, we're talking a phased program, because,
Yeah.
800 in 1 year was like, that's a
Way
little
too
bit too
much.
much, Steve. We're
Yeah.
gonna chop this up and slice
Yeah.
and dice, and we do 300 or so thousand, yeah,
Right.
okay, it's doable. And that's the approach we took here. And just speaking to a question over here, I think you said, what have we done so far? This came together this fall, this report from Gale Associates. So I put together my recommendations, and what we are planning to do right now, and I've spoken with Ray about it, is to put out an IFB for a designer on the roof using the current funding.
Right.
So using Ray's explanation of how we get it designed, so that when town meeting says, yep, we approve it, okay, we're off to the races. We've already designed it. Now we've got the funding to bang the nails. So that's the approach we're taking here. I'm using the prior year's funding for the engineer, and we'll be ready to go once town meeting approves the funds.
Yeah, that slate roof's gonna be no small project, right?
No, you should have seen what it was to just repair it a
Slate
few
and
years
tile,
ago,
I
to
mean-
just
It's
to find someone to do it.
Yeah, it's not a skill set
You
find
send to
out there.
Mexico or California or
It
Nevada.
wasn't pleasant to find those repairs, right?
Hudson's.
Yeah.
The things remind me too, facilities, it's only you, right? Or you're kind of working with the,
There's 2 people.
Greg Roberts is the building maintenance
Oh, okay.
supervisor. Greg
Okay.
works directly for me. We're
But-
largely outsourced as far as physical hands-on labor.
That's the thing, that all of this stuff you're going to have to, you're bringing in contractors.
Yes.
Right, but we also have standard across the board contracts that are issued every year. So we have an electrician on contract, we have a plumber on contract, we have HVAC service on contract, we have fire prevention systems on contract, et cetera.
Right, and this is all, it's, most of it is.
And that's
small.
all out of the, right, that's all
That's
the
all
day-to-day
operating,
stuff, which is
right.
operating, correct?
That's budget, right, yeah.
Right.
But just for general knowledge here, But are you asked to do some of the hands-on stuff? I mean, that's part of your
I
job.
don't- I don't
No,
have
you're not doing
No.
that anymore.
No, that's,
No.
he's the manager
We
and
know
the
you
director of
can.
the construction.
You don't get down on the way down.
No.
It's,
Greg may on
he's,
occasion, but not
It's
Steve.
great.
Yeah, Greg has been a great guy to have on
Okay,
board.
good.
He is excellent at the mechanical stuff, so he's really a genius at it. So he oftentimes gets down and can address these mechanical issues
Yeah.
and lead us to a quick and less costly solution many times. So he's a great guy to have on the team.
Okay.
Steve, last year we had a long discussion about the ESCO project, the impact on the facilities and energy efficiency. So I don't really see anything this year anymore, so is this done?
It's done.
So
Let's go
We,
with
we are,
Yep.
we are in our guaranteed phases now.
Right, yeah, that wrapped up the 1 year anniversary, I think is,
was just
was
in
the
December.
16th?
It was just in
the
December.
Yeah, it just happened, so, we are on target to meet all our savings goals. That is a quarterly report that's provided by Amoresco. I sit down on that frequency and review it with them. We note at those reports if there are any aberrations as far as temperature adjustments or schedules that are gonna throw the energy savings off. So it's an excellent tool to keep hold of these savings and make sure we are tracking the savings. They will continue to do that. So we're partnering with Amoresco to keep these energy costs in line with what they project.
But there won't be any more expenses that you'll see as part of the ESCO project.
There's no
That's,
follow-up?
there is follow-up, there's follow-up, you mean of
No,
phase
ano-
2?
another- Yeah.
We haven't talked about it yet.
You're talking about another ESCO project?
Yeah, did we cover everything or?
Well, no, we didn't, because as Dawn and some of the original members will remember,
Yeah.
the original estimate was $7 million.
Yeah, that was way over.
We
Trimmed it down.
pared it down to 4.1, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, did we do everything? No. Will we do everything? I don't know.
We pared back based on payback time.
Yeah.
So we said we didn't wanna pay for anything that wasn't gonna
Yeah.
be covered in 7 years.
Like some of the stuff was
We ratcheted
payback
down the lighting.
of 15 years, 20 years, 22 years, or whatever.
Some had already
And
been
during the
done.
discussion, it was deemed that's not
Okay.
worthy.
So of the 27 buildings that we have, are any of them ESCO?
Almost all of them.
Okay, but the roof repair and other things, these are ones that go off on longer schedules than 7
No,
years?
roof repairs are not an ESCO. ESCO are energy savings.
Well,
So,
yeah, but
so
you-
for instance,
to
it's,
repair your roof, I mean, I would.
well, yeah,
hope
but
you
that,
save
does-
some
but that,
energy.
right, but that doesn't qualify as a guaranteed
But
savings.
some of these buildings then will have some aspect to them of an ESCO.
Pretty much.
They will have, I don't wanna use the terms interchangeably, they will have some aspects of energy savings.
Yes.
An ESCO is a distinct,
Yeah,
Right.
specific project, so I don't wanna use the terms interchangeably.
right, so there's some things that are probably in the nature of deferred maintenance or
Yeah.
repairs.
Yeah.
That also do double duty, as
Yeah, it will,
energy saving.
it may generate some energy savings, but not that comes under the ESCO measuring that Thomas was referring to.
Right, that's
Well,
the
that's
ESCO
a
was
different project,
Right.
okay, but going forward,
If we put a new roof on a building, or we fix a roof and all of a sudden there aren't any leakages or whatever,
mhm,
we're not gonna have analytical data to show what the savings energy-wise would be because we did that.
I understand that.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is if we've got 27 buildings and we don't have the manpower at any one point in time to get the job done like we did with the ESCO project, all got done at once, huge labor force, all comes in, done, bang.
Right.
7 years down the line, the savings come in.
Correct.
So could we knock down some of the deferred maintenance expenses on the 27 buildings? This is way out of our scope on this committee, by a new ESCO.
New type of ESCO where you're actually
Well,
gonna have
you
a payback of.
Again, we haven't
repairs.
thought of it because
Yeah.
Great, go ahead.
as Bill said, the
Different
projects
Well, yeah.
the projects we took off the
Wouldn't be
list
energy per se,
had
right?
major,
Well,
had lengthy payback periods.
Well,
Right.
some of them may
And
not.
if we think back on that ESCO, I have this chapter 25A
Yeah.
project.
Right.
It has to meet certain criteria financially to be qualified.
Mhm.
And we ratcheted down the time frame, I think, to 12 years, as I recall. or
Seven.
11
whatever.
point something,
Okay.
no, 11 point something
Yeah,
overall.
yeah.
And we-
11.8.
Oh, overall.
11.8.
We reduced it, we
Yeah,
reduced
something
it,
like that.
yeah, by
And
quite a
by
bit.
design,
No.
okay? So we have to meet all those criteria on a future project. Now, thinking about it, lighting was the thing that led the way. That's a low-hanging fruit that saved a lot of energy, and it was a big energy saver to fund some of these other improvements. So, my mission is, looking forward, look at the lighting, 5 years down the road, in that period, where you maybe have additional savings with lighting gets more efficient. That's a time frame to look at it. So that would be in the future, if I were to look at lighting.
But we're not planning on a second
Boilers?
ESCO project. Excuse me.
Right, boilers, all these buildings have boilers?
Yep.
They all have steam traps?
Yep, Dawn's favorite.
Did she listen to us, Dawn, on the way
Okay.
in? Dawn, did you
You
bug
need a
me?
picture of me after I've done the steam trap.
Right.
Oh, yes, right. All right, but, so I'm just saying,
No,
they
no,
gotta,
that's-
instead of having, a nut to crack on this building of X amount of dollars, with an ESCO, maybe you could shave off a quarter, maybe 50%. And then,
Again, it all depends
yeah.
on the payback
Right.
period of the
Yeah.
particular
Well, yeah, I
project.
understand.
Well, I think to your point, what you're getting to is and one of the reasons why everyone liked the ESCO was you could wrap up a bunch of different projects without putting each one separately out to bid,
Yeah.
which, because they were basically doing some more subcontracting underneath them, which is
Which
nice.
a previous finance committee is what they wanted us to do, if you
Right.
remember.
Right.
It was one-stop shopping.
Right.
Essentially, you design and construction, you roll one check, and there it is, and it worked great.
Well, now we saw how it worked, fine. We've gone
Right.
through that process. It looked like smoke and mirrors when we started out.
Yes, I
mean,
know.
yeah.
I sat through many of those sessions, yes, I know.
Right. You have to
Different way
read
of
the
doing it.
statute and it's right there.
Yeah.
And these
Again,
companies
it's not
have to-
something we've considered today because we're just still newbies at it and we're
Right.
still, we just finished our first year under the program of,
Yeah.
payback, so. But
Yeah.
it could be something we look at in the
So
future.
you want a roofing ESCO?
I don't think that would
Yeah.
qualify.
I
don't think that would meet the
No,
criteria.
I don't think it's gonna do it.
I mean, there is insulation involved, but
Eventually.
it's
Yeah, but-
mostly wet.
But
Yeah.
once we take a look at these buildings, I bet we see a whole bunch
Oh,
of stuff in
yeah.
there. Just like, if we ever
Always
got your
have a-
list, we'd probably pass out, right?
We always have an eye to the energy.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
size
Yeah.
and energy.
Building envelope,
Yeah.
absolutely.
okay.
Any
But
other
then you get
questions?
into the, what's the life expectancy of some of the buildings, useful life expectancy.
Right.
Where you go ahead and say that put more money into that building is not gonna be.
Well, we'd have to go through, just like we did with the
Yeah.
others, I guess.
That was a decision we made with the police department.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Hold on
that's,
to that building.
that's what can come through and, in a combination of, facilities master plan
And we
too.
hope to do a facilities master plan too, that's correct.
And those are a
Yeah.
bunch of things that we should be,
Yep.
rolling up, studying.
Well, you don't wanna put a lot of money into, let's take an example, as a elementary school building that may be,
Right.
surveyed at some point.
Yep.
That you wanna do all this work and then all of a sudden now we're gonna get rid of it.
And I think we have facilities master plan too in FY20 or something like that,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So,
Okay, I don't have any other questions. I'm in pretty good shape, I think. I think that's a great follow-up for, future planning to think about.
Yep, and we'll try to
Master
get you
list.
that, we'll work on that second year, if not the third year also.
yeah, if we can just have that.
Yep, no,
program.
as long as you understand it's gonna be a really general list.
Right, and the prices,
Okay,
the
yeah.
prices change, but I
Correct.
think,
Yeah.
Okay,
If we know there's leftover money, there's,
Yeah.
we're anticipating maybe some CPA.
well, we won't
stuff.
know if there's leftover money till we get closer to
Well,
the
no,
middle
no,
to
but
the end of the
I mean-
year.
right?
Yep,
But
okay,
for this presentation, that'd been good.
Yeah.
To have all
Yep.
that information.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks,
we will,
Steve.
we will do some work, thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping me dry.
Rain every day. Okay. Chris?
Do you want an overview, do you wanna start with questions, or do you wanna focus
Well,
on something?
I think we should,
We can ask more.
Chris, I think it'd be great if you could just
Steve?
give an overview. I think,
We're thinking.
Steve, one last question. This is sort of like beating a dead horse, maybe. ESCO type project, roof, solar panels. So when you do roofing work, is there an opportunity for an ESCO type project where we throw solar panels?
Solar panels are not an ESCO.
There's your grade.
They're not?
They're not covered by the ESCO chapter 25?
But there's
No.
plenty of other ways to finance them.
Yeah.
Solar, I think Andrew's got a solar,
Yeah, we're
solar
doing some work,
agenda.
but yeah, solar panels are not an
But
ESCO.
we're waiting to see how we got ways and then metering
Good thought, though. Thanks.
We're really doing along with it.
Yeah, we're doing some work to try to piggyback some things, but it's still in the infancy stages.
Okay.
Of course, you have to put a new roof
Thanks,
on
Steve.
before you do that.
Yeah.
Right. That's
You
true.
start with a new roof.
Chris, I think it'd be great if you could just give a quick overview. You know, we know there's a transition, so and you know what you found, what you're looking for next year, and you know what your major goals are, maybe for the department as a whole at a really high level. And then you can talk about your capital plan and how it's working there.
Well, I'm Chris McClure, IT Director for the town. By way of introduction, Jennifer had sent me some questions, so I'll try and answer those and frame sort of a broader view. So, been here almost a year, and I have to say that, you know, nothing scary, everything, you know, I've been very happy with what I found. It's very well managed. You know, the town as a whole, I've been impressed by just the professionalism, you know, the town is managed, IT especially. Of course, there's always room for improvement. So this year, first year, I always like to just kind of get a sense and a pulse of what is happening, and you know, before we make any sort of drastic changes, and kind of get a truer sense. One of the interesting things in IT now, I think, is that IT is becoming less and less about capital. It's becoming more operating and utility based, where it's really about, and especially with the cloud and looking at those predictable annual operating costs. And there still is some discussion around capital, but it's different, I think, than in other disciplines. So for me, it's about keeping things simple. The network, keeping a simple, powerful, fast network is utmost, especially with reliance on the cloud and that sort of, you know, interconnectivity. So this year, we focused on increasing our fiber network where it made sense. We had to connect the new fire station to the network, and we were able to leverage, because of that work being done, connecting the Stevens Estate and the Bradford Tower to the fiber network. So that advanced a couple of goals. One, the Stevens Estate is now on our phone system, on our data network, you know, having access to all of those sort of town resources. It's also used for emergency management, primarily the barn in the back and the gatehouse. There's some plan for community development to use that. So we're able to light all of that up more economically because of the work we're already doing right there at the new fire station. And also simultaneously, we were able to connect Bradford Tower, which has a couple other benefits. One being that the water department DPW is currently looking at doing some microwave SCADA, connecting some of their sites, so there's some strategic part there. But also we're working with public safety to advance their goal of doing a fiber radio connection and eliminating some of the liabilities that they had in their existing radio. So they're able to make some progress connecting that site and getting some digital repeaters, et cetera, on that. Around that same note, I think one of the things that I'm proudest of this year is we were able really to strengthen the relationship with the school, work on some really good collaborative projects, you know, one being Google Apps, which we'll talk about a bit later, but just that relationship and beefing up that network so that we were able to take a lot of the core network and increase it from 1 to 10 gigs for strategic places. We were also able, working with the school, to increase our total internet connection, you know, out to the world from 500 megs to about 750 megs, which proved critical with some of the online curriculum that the school was working on this year. So there were a lot of school districts that, you know, basically crashed the town's network and had some huge bottlenecks. And we saw days where our capacity was at like at 90%, but we, you know, pretty much went through that unscathed. So the focus on the network remains. We're united with the school in the concept that as much as makes sense to put into the cloud, we're doing that. The Munis financial system, we were able to work with accounting to make the accounts payable and general ledger and now payroll a success, and we're moving towards making, you know, the budgeting module this summer, lighting up the utility billing and the tax payments and other pieces of that. We decided not to go with the permitting piece inside Munis just because it's not as good as some of the other systems, so we're actually working with View Permit for the community development boards to get some online permitting turned on this spring. We're going to be launching Google Apps for government next month. The only reason we've delayed it a little bit is because there have been so many sort of changes and disruptions recently. I didn't want people in tears over over what's really a good, kind of an exciting project. Google is a rock solid company. There are some cost savings, and one of the caveats I always try to explain when looking at the cloud, the sort of traditional capital model versus a cloud model, is the return on investment can be very complicated sometimes. I think sometimes people get the notion that the cloud is free or that it's significantly less expensive than other options, but there is a cost to it. But the analogy I give is, so for example, it costs us now with Google $100 per user per year for the entire suite of apps, all licensing and unlimited storage with Google. But for that $100, we can buy into basically $1 billion infrastructure with millions of servers and tens of thousands of employees, et cetera. Where if I were to spend that $100 here, I would get exactly $100 worth of return on that investment. So, from a sunk cost standpoint, the savings aren't drastic if you look at an operating budget, but in terms of what you're buying and capacity and resiliency and the management and all that stuff, it's really, you really can't equate, the savings. We are also, though, cognizant that not everything is ready to go in the cloud right now. There are things that are too, what I call heavy. So phone systems, for example, aren't quite there yet in terms of being truly in the cloud. And also just the critical nature of some of these things, having a phone system in the cloud, especially for an organization this large. If you had an organization of 3 or 4 people, or something that might make a stronger case for it. But also the returns on investment aren't quite there and aren't quite as solid as like Google Apps type piece. There are things that are very sensitive or secure, like the public safety systems and those sorts of things. And there are discussions about how to move that to the cloud sort of responsibly, but we're not quite there yet. We also, as a town government, there are some things that slow us down over some industries toward moving to web or cloud-based things, some legacy systems, older software. We're not as homogenous sometimes as other organizations, so we're dealing with that. But sort of a forms-based planning model, we're slowly trying to get those things in alliance. So now Munis is a cloud-based system, Google is a cloud-based system. The school has almost all their systems in the cloud. They're a power school, et cetera. So our goal is, whenever that becomes available and appropriate, to keep moving that, so our footprint here won't grow. So the strategy for the stuff left behind is to centralize, consolidate, virtualize what's ever left. And so that is sort of one of the things that wasn't fully realized when I came here. So there was an initial attempt to virtualize, and I'd say we're about at a 60% virtualization right now, which is pretty good. They're coming up on a cycle where that sort of first generation equipment is sort of reaching end of life. We also have all the servers at the police station here, for example, are still physical servers. They're still using tape backup instead of sort of disk backup to do some things. So one of the challenges I recognized based on the current capital structure was there was sort of a $50,000 a year bucket for buying servers, switches, et cetera. But that really doesn't buy sort of enough of anything in 1 year to sort of advance that. So working with Andrew, we identified sort of a different 5-year plan within the operating and capital budget. What we identified is there's an emerging, well, not emerging, but it's an established technology, a newer technology that Shrewsbury and other towns and other organizations have gone through. It's called hyperconverged solution, where basically it's sort of the Google model. You've got your processors and storage and networking in sort of a box that replaces your virtual infrastructure, physical infrastructure, et cetera. So for what we need, those are about $100,000 a piece. They last for about 5 years. So what we looked at doing, and sort of this utility model, we talked about leasing or other things. I'm generally opposed to leasing, especially for like workstations and laptops. But when you start getting in the server realm, I think ultimately my goal is to start even thinking about servers and phone systems in that utility model where you've got a fixed price you pay every year, and you get out of the forklift upgrade, and you get rid of some of that thing, and you just know that you've got this agile environment that keeps moving. So this is closer to that. So that the goal is, within my operating budget, we had a $60,000 sort of capital line item that we're able to increase to $100,000. That was earmarked for sort of workstation, et cetera, replacement. And I think the thinking is we're going to swap that. So the sort of the CIC, the capital $50,000, will buy, and it's more appropriate for capital, actual stuff, laptops, workstations, et cetera. which even in this day and age are really the lifeblood and kind of one of the most important things about access to this, because it controls people's experience. So with all of this great stuff happening in the cloud and all this great virtualization and all these things, if people can't do the work or get to the cloud, I remember at one town meeting in another town being asked that, you know, with everything in the cloud, why do we need to buy computers still? And I felt like saying, well,
How do you access?
it's not telepathy yet. You need something that's going to get you to the cloud. And so, and of course, we're looking out for, you know, looking at the school's model of using Chromebooks and things down the road and it becomes more, you know, available. But on the town side this year, we did things like make sure every department had a laptop versus a, you know, a desktop. So just increasing the mobility, and that helped out greatly during the town hall move, and that it was less impactful because we were able to be a little bit more agile. But the thinking is using basically for next year $100,000 in the operating capital to purchase the hyper-converged solution for here at the police station, which will also facilitate the big project that the police and fire are looking at, the IMC public safety software, where that would basically be the host for that. We're also looking and working with the assessing department on modernizing their assessing software to like a Patriot type system, so that would be able to facilitate that. We would be able to virtualize the remaining physical servers both here and at Town Hall because of our robust network. We're able, you know, it's really sort of arbitrary as to where servers live. The goal then would be next year to replace the aging hardware at Town Hall with a second one of these boxes. And so in that case, you've got the lightest footprint you can have, while still basically having full redundancy, because each one would operate at roughly 50% capacity at all times. So you could have some disaster recovery built into that, you know, self-contained backup between the two, et cetera. And at that point, we would be 100% virtualized. We would get rid of our tape system. We have no physical servers, and we would have you know, all of the benefits of having virtual servers as well, the management, the scalability, ability to spin up machines without buying hardware, et cetera, with the goal of never growing that, of sort of maintaining that and reducing that as necessary. The plan then would be in years 3 and 4 to use that in that line item to purchase additional upgrades for the network, edge switches, core switches, wireless, et cetera. Because of all the work we did this year, we're really in pretty good shape network-wise, and the work that was done last year from an edge and a core switch standpoint. But obviously, IT never stops. And one of the things that often gets overlooked and it's kind of boring is replacing those closet switches, looking at cabling within the buildings and projects, and looking at some of those other pieces, making sure that system, you know, works pretty well. Our phone system is, you know, we have the Cisco phone system. It's in really good shape, fairly new, but again, nothing lasts forever. So, you know, within everything in IT has a 5 or 6 or 7 year life cycle now. So in that year 5, looking at, you know, at roughly $100,000 to replace or upgrade that phone system. And of course, with technology changing so rapidly, there could be something completely different that changes the game in the meantime. But I like kind of a set it and forget it attitude. And then use the sort of the capital money every year to infuse and make sure that people have working computers and you know, laptops and tablets, and really empower people with that. So that wasn't brief, but that's.
And actually, I think you have this, you're going where I'm going. If you have questions about the one of the requests that comes under fire is really under police and fire to replace the payment system. Chris would be the person if you have any questions on that. Because I could see Karen, I can already read Karen upside down.
Been on this panel for too long. I noticed that part of the police and fire is something called mapping, Google-based mapping.
Within IMC.
Oh,
I believe that's within IMC.
What page you on, Karen?
I'm on page 77.
Yes.
And I'm looking at
Yes.
project-related fees,
Yes.
but the project was mapping, Google-based. What
Yes.
is that like GIS?
Yes and no. So if you don't mind, because this will be a silo in itself, this discussion about the police and fire.
Okay,
Right?
that'll be a
I'm
silo, but does
very
that connect
happy.
with the silo in the assessor's department?
Yes, and that's one of the things,
Okay.
one of the goals, to take a step back, one of the things I've always valued in towns is GIS mapping systems. And it's kind of a no good deed goes unpunished type scenario, because it's a hard road. But one of the things we've worked really hard on this year, we brought in a product called People Forms and People GIS, which powers our reported tool and is starting to link these different silos of data You know, so we're not having Excel spreadsheets, we're actually having databases that talk to each other and sort of interact in that way, and setting some data standards. And one of the things that came as a result of that was for the first time ever having a master address table. We've also worked with some GIS, consultants. If you've seen our new Google-based GIS map on the website, that's kind of a preview of some of this. For the first time, having like a Bible of addresses that every database and every system within the town uses. And we've got kind of our first version that we sourced first from our Canvas system and assessors. We worked with MassGIS, we worked with Google, we worked with these different sources to marry that together as best as possible. We've got a long way to go, but we've got a first version of that. And so everything going forward is based on that integration point, making sure that all addressing and all databases are consistent.
So is that a database schema issue that you were trying to?
Yeah.
The data types weren't the same.
Yeah, and it's just there are multiple sources, and,
Yeah,
and so.
the fire department has a different list of
Right.
names and addresses
Right.
than.
So I will talk about IMC broader, and get to that. And one other thing I've made clear talking to both chiefs is that I've done this conversion before in other towns, the payment to the IMC conversion. I'm fully comfortable that we have the capability of doing it. And the thing I've stressed to both chiefs is that although I fully support this as a technology fit, it really is a public safety push. The need for this is justified by public safety needs. So while I agree with the reasons for doing it, and I think it's a sound piece of software and I can talk to the merits of it, I think it really sells itself from a public safety need in terms of what it does, what it brings. There's the idea of a common operating picture of allowing police and fire better to have access to the same information. IMC, for example, has an actual working mobile component where PAMET doesn't have one right now, so that the cruisers in the field can access information in real time. It has a working CGIS interface. So CGIS is the Criminal Justice Information System. So right now, they have to run third-party software to run that separately, and they don't have that connected to their CAD system. So IMC allows you to run, even with a barcode, or run a license plate or a license, and it will simultaneously query the state and our local system and return information. Yeah.
Fingerprints?
Possibly, yeah. So it's,
You scared?
yeah, it.
It is scary.
Yeah. So the
Somebody wanna
mapping.
tell us, Karen?
So when they say Google mapping, what they're really referring to is the engine, is that it uses a Google engine to render the maps. And so it's taking our data and basically using a Google engine. So it's sort of buying the frame around to do it. And you get the benefits of all the built-in toolkits with Google, and it's a nice fit because the town is also now on Google, and there's just some good synergy between all of that.
What's the backup to the cloud?
Well, I can answer that.
Okay.
So, I've been touring the departments, giving sort of personalized Google training to get people ready for this. There's not one cloud. I think that's a misnomer. Not all clouds are created equal. So, I mean, the cloud is a concept, et cetera. But to me, Google, Amazon to an extent, Apple to a lesser extent, Microsoft is pretty good. But Google is sort of the premier example of what actual cloud computing is. It's not a server that's sitting in somebody's closet somewhere with an air conditioner on it, that's no better than something we would have here. Google's model is true distributed computing. So you have probably literally millions of server instances around the world, right?
Around the world?
Around the world.
Yeah, bunkers.
And they're daisy chained together in some sort of way?
Well,
Synchronization's the issue.
synchronization, but they're also secure. But they're also secure because the data is fragmented and encrypted. So Google could literally lose a third of their servers or have them stolen, and the data would just be garbage. Every time you check your email, it's being reassembled from thousands of different computers every time. So the backup is itself, it's a self-healing system.
Self-healing.
Self-healing.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And not that it's perfect, but it's pretty good.
Very difficult.
Yeah. And part of the backup to the cloud is those things that we don't put in the cloud. So one of the questions Jennifer had asked was the strategy to move from, to start using Google Drive versus Dropbox and Laserfish. And I've looked at Laserfish when I first came in, and I come to the conclusion that we're certainly getting rid of Dropbox, because Dropbox, you can't manage it. I mean, one of the pet peeves I have with the way the cloud is used is it's not managed well. So people will have individual Dropbox accounts and they'll have town documents stored and personal things and that kind of stuff. And even like the iPhone to a certain extent doesn't have some of those sort of enterprise management features. So Google offers a lot of that. So Dropbox will be entirely replaced by Google Drive this year, where we can manage, etc. Laserfish does a very unique role. One is it backs up the cloud, and that we have things that aren't in the cloud that we store here. But Laserfish is, Google is real time, it's messy, it's about collaboration, it's about moving and storing and changing and all that kind of stuff. But it's not great necessarily about taking that final document, putting it somewhere, archiving it, indexing it, etc. Laserfish is in the document business. They understand document retention law, they understand formatting, they were a document company before they were an electronic storage company, so they bring that piece. So I think we really see Laserfish as sort of where our permanent documents go to live when we're sort of done manipulating them in Google. We control it, it's safe, we back it up, etc. They get stored in a particular format, they're sort of locked for editing, they're indexed, there's specific kinds of documents, minutes, agendas.
So
So it's like a dead file storage.
It's like a dead file storage.
Dead file storage, and
Right.
so they
Yeah,
and
but it's a database, it's searchable, it's queryable, but it's sort of, it's protected and apart. So that's everything is about redundancy where it makes sense. So at some point, a document is born, grows in Google, changes, etc. And at some point, it's ripped off, permanently stored, indexed, and now it's part of that storage. So I think they make a good fit together, and I think, looking at it, I think that's going to make sense for us.
So our meeting minutes will end up in that.
Yeah, they do.
Eventually.
Your meeting minutes, yeah, we're doing a better job, and one of the things I pushed Laserfish this year, because they are not quite a cloud-based company, they're getting there, is making it easier to access the stuff online, making the search better. So now if you, like our Google search on the website, actually searches inside Laserfish for the public records now, and it's starting to get better at that. Getting rid of the duplicate storage, so instead of people storing stuff in a web folder and Laserfish, storing it once and then pointing to that from the website. So there's more work being done around that, but that's the role of that.
And we're going to focus on some institutional support, educational support.
Yes.
In the school system. It looks like this year from what I can see in the school department's budget, I sort of like glanced at, which is terrific.
Mhm.
So our kids are going to get the benefit
Oh, definitely.
of increased, looks like, educational instruction and familiarity with things electronic. Not that they already don't, they could probably teach us all.
Right.
They're already using
10 times
Google.
over.
Yeah, 10 times over.
That's all they
You
use.
made a
all
comment
they
that you're one going around and teaching.
Yeah.
So you're teaching the departments, then who's on call for the continuous teaching? Is that you? Because you're kind of the
Yeah, so-
brainiac behind this, so.
Yeah, so that's a good question, a little outside the capital realm now. But, I mean, one of the things you get really good at in government is wearing a lot of hats and starting to do it well. And one of the things to my point earlier about the benefits of the cloud, in something like Google, it's very important that it succeed.
Yep.
So when something is like that, I want to personally ensure that it's going to succeed, and so there are areas where we can delegate and et cetera. So, but this thing, because it was my initiative and because it's so important, and I've seen places where the implementation doesn't go well and you really can't recover from that. So we're really building that up. But one of the advantages of this cloud-based model is I get to do what I love, which is helping people use the technology as opposed to fixing it.
Yes.
And so that's the model. I think we've done a really good job. We've put in a really good central IT ticketing system and management system, and we really, even though people resist sometimes, but the whole idea of metrics and making sure that people are reporting what they do. And I've really sort of pushed to have the techs and the network admin, manage those tickets and delegate, and it works pretty well. And so it does free up time to do things like this, because to me, there's a higher sense of, there's higher dividends paid on getting something like this right than sort of keeping something on life support and keeping it going. And you mentioned the word institutional. I mean, one of the things that I love, and that I think Google does really well, is this concept of institutional knowledge, common operating picture, allowing the organization to retain information in a better way, in a central way, so that new people can come in the future and have access to that without having to parse it together. So one of the things that we do in Google, for example, is we create what I call dashboards, right? So it's a web page that we build like an intranet or a portal that we build that's accessible only inside. We can make it many as we want. We have one for the patrol, so when they go out on their cruisers that are now internet enabled, they can check their mail. They basically get a water cooler where they can see all related documents and everything. They're all on one page. We have a staff portal as we launch Google, so that when everyone comes in the morning, they go to this common place where HR can post notices, there's calendars, there's policies and documents, there's shortcuts and all of that kind of stuff. So it allows people also to share with each other and to learn from each other as people learn things in post. So everybody sort of gets smarter at the same time. And it breaks down some of the barriers for collaborating and communicating that we have currently.
Social media.
Social media, it's internal social media,
Internal
yeah.
social.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I have one big one at the end. I don't wanna.
Just wanna warm up?
Well, so it seems like, it's very much focused on the internal infrastructure of the town, how the departments operate and stuff is stored. How much, what about the external interfaces to the citizens?
Oh,
You know?
now I can talk on that.
You're another one of them right up his alley.
Everything is paper-based right now. I get my permit, get everything I mean, it's all a paper thing, When is there
Absolutely,
anything?
absolutely. So, one of my philosophies in technology, and that I'm not a pure technology person, if you can't tell. Technology doesn't exist for its own sake. There's no intrinsic value to technology. It's a tool. It does something for us. And I've worked in a couple of towns here. One of my mantra is sort of, every technology needs to benefit the citizenry at some point. And I love things that are transparent. I don't like any technology that is in a closet or somewhere that can't be seen. Everything. So even in just the first year, taking Laserfish, that was primarily a back office application, internal, and making it more accessible and more available to the public. Doing something like Google, where one of the most powerful things of Google is, one, the efficiency that can transform the organization in terms of streamlining communication and turning workflow around. But two, everything in Google can easily be published to the public, right, in terms of documents and folders and calendars and all this work with very little effort. So it can take a lot of what we're doing, and you can transform the way an organization, even just the speed and efficiency at which it can communicate. We focused on some minor changes to the website this year and improving that. The People Forms portal and the Report It tool in terms of reaching out and engaging citizens. If you actually fill out a Report It piece, we track it with an internal dashboard, and when it's resolved, there's a survey that goes back out, so we've actually got metrics to see how we're doing in terms of working with people. The big push, Munis has been taking him a lot of time, but one of the jewels in that for me is the citizen self-service portal that allows better tax lookup and payments, etc. The push toward getting a better GIS presence online with the Google Map and more toolkits and more updated information. The online permitting piece that we're working hard now with community development to get launched this spring, so you can apply for a building permit and have workflow and all that stuff sort of inside. It's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. We've worked pretty heavily with the town manager we hit our goal of 2016 Twitter followers before 2016. We've significantly increased what we're putting out on social media, how it's put out on social media, so that a lot of it happens automatically, so that things get posted, it gets hashtagged and sort of pushed out there in terms of how we follow people and post. We have a YouTube presence now that we're starting to develop. We've got some of these we have a Google Plus presence. We've got we're trying to build all of this. But yeah, absolutely for me, this is all about service delivery at the end, and it's all about that transparency and pushing things out to the public.
I know you've got another one. I just have to do.
He's got a minor one and a
I have
major
to wait
one.
I have to wait all the way to the end.
Don't take his thunder, Karen.
No, I want to. No, yes, I'm to do that. I mean, I don't know what is going on here, but it's going to be big. There've been some articles in the newspaper about how weak Massachusetts Freedom of Information Act law is in comparison to other
Public
states.
records requests.
Public records requests. If I'm up in Maine and I'm doing some community work up there and I need to find out what's going on, I can get the selectmen's notes right down with all the pencil drawings on them, and I've done it, simply by a FOIA request, and if they don't give it to me, I go to court to get it. Massachusetts is kind of.
You're speaking very general terms.
I'm speaking kind of.
Because I'm gonna take this question.
general.
I'm gonna take this question.
If the law is changed, and I don't know to what extent there's anything before the legislature
February
now.
4th. The Senate is taking it up on February 4th. The
Correct.
House of the Representatives already passed it.
I'm going to the Mass Municipal Association meeting in a couple of
Look
weeks.
forward to
so
seeing
I'm
you.
gonna have my ears glued on this one, to see. But, it would seem to me that the ease of, if the law is changed, in some way to make the turnaround faster for people to get their information, you could turn around that information and get it right out by using the same.
Yeah.
Well, it
roads.
depends on the information. First of all,
Yeah.
since there's a lot, since you alluded to the Massachusetts reluctancy
Well,
to
it's just been
produce-
that way for 15 years.
Well, no, it's not. It's community by community. I mean,
Uh-huh.
one of the things that distressed me last week of the release of whatever it was, the Northeastern Studies, they didn't identify the community. They identified the communities that wanted to charge $2,000 for the reporters' inquiries and whatever, but
Oh,
they
yeah,
didn't.
that's right.
But they didn't list the communities that responded immediately, of which North Andover was one of them.
Yes.
And the reason I know that is because I'm responsible for the public records requests that come in.
Okay.
So everybody gets answered within 10 days. Whether you like the answer or not, you get an answer within 10 days. More often than not, most records we say, yes, are available, but here's the cost for research time and the photocopying or whatever, which is permitted, and then once they pay, they get it. And you kind of have a sense of when there's, we kind of had a sense that this was not a true request, but we still responded to it, both the police department and the town hall request, as opposed to one community saying that they would take $1,200 to do 1 hour of research or something like that.
But now this can get out faster.
Well,
Without copying.
one of the major proposals that's gonna cause agita for the communities is no charges for public records requests. So what that'll do is it'll open up Pandora's box to not only the significant requests or the true requests, but every Tom, Dick, or Harry request, and we get those too. We get some usual requests from some of our citizens and others, or union, trade unions, that once you give them what it's going to cost because of the extent of their request, they go, you never hear from them again. Or there are companies that are looking to solicit business, so they'll want to know what our outstanding checks are or what our bonds, a whole bunch of financial stuff that would take our treasurer probably between 8 and 15 hours to accumulate time. So if one of the changes is that all of a sudden there's no more fees for requests, and actually I think it's the opposite. I think one of the things is because this will open up to more requests, communities are going to have more time, if I'm not mistaken, to respond to requests. Not 10 days, it might be 15 days or 20 days.
Mhm.
So we respond. So some of this stuff will make it easier to respond, but again, you still need the staff time, somebody to go search it. We can't.
There's a certain amount of judgment that has to be applied.
Right, because
So you just
there
can't
are
press a button
probably,
and
I
have
think
it
there
spit
are
out.
29 or 30 exemptions from the public records law, so we still have to review every request to make sure. So we put a lot of things out there.
Although, way to help with that is, if it's public, we do a good job, do a better job getting it out there in the first place, so that it doesn't
Right.
have to be a request, making it both out there and easier to search and access.
Yep.
Yeah.
Takes us-
But we get requests every week, we want bid results, so we want a copy of your contract, and our response is real simple, just go to our website. It's there, you don't have to ask us, you don't have to pay us, you don't have to have us produce it, it's already there. So probably 5 out of 10 requests, that's the response we give, it's already on our website.
And that's a good one. Thank you.
Thomas, part 2.
What do you do when Google goes out of business?
Well,
Really?
the philosophy is everything is agile, everything is portable, and everybody can go out of business. So the reason Google makes sense now is because Google makes sense now. At the point they no longer make sense, we make sure that we're in a position to pack up and go somewhere else. We're able to do that. Google has excellent open data standards you can package everything up now and move it. We have binding legal contracts with them for terms. It's all protected under the GSA, and they're now, you know, by proxy, the domestic contract. The model, anyone who is smart in IT is looking at concepts and agility and the ability to move from one to the next, because nothing lasts forever. Google may not be the best thing. Google wasn't a player 5-6 years ago. They weren't there. So that's why we plan and we look out and we make sure that we can compartmentalize. And that's also why we don't put all our eggs in one basket. So we've got many vendors, many things, some in the cloud, some local, and we've got contingency planning for that. And hopefully we could forecast and make plans to go to something bigger and better when it's available.
Is it a long-term contract or is this a yearly?
We no, it's a yearly, but we piggyback the GSA. We didn't just go out and get Google on our own. It's not even a state contract, it's a federal contract. So it's a GSA contract that we were allowed to piggyback once we got permission to do so. So
Where
we're
do
not.
you get permission to do that?
You obviously need permission from the GSA, but you also need permission from the state because it's a contract. The state requires, when you join multi-state or out-of-state contracts, the state requires it to have followed roughly the 30B process of an appropriate bidding and an appropriate process or whatever. So we receive permission from both the GSA and the state to piggyback this contract. So it is a GSA contract. It's not even a Commonwealth of Massachusetts contract.
Yeah, and as a vendor, you can't sell to anybody less than the GSA. So that's pretty much the cheapest you're gonna get.
Okay, now for the biggie.
Oh, no, I thought.
That was the big question? What happens if Google goes out of business? What a letdown.
I used to be a bad
Karen was backing away.
So, Chris, let me, so an accolade and a perspective question. First of all, it is stunning to see the difference in 3 years. So, I have a child in middle school, no in the high school. And the difference between how my middle school child is using technology and Google compared to just 3 years ago it's like, it's a whole new language.
Mhm.
It's a whole new expertise. And you see, you know, it's conditioning, probably not the best word, but it's readying them for the world once they leave school. Because he's working at 7th grade really in the same way that a lot of professionals are working today.
Mhm.
And that, to me, is really important. So in terms of kind of the front-facing, yeah, I see that right now. It's powerful.
Mhm.
So, which kind of brings me to this, which is, you kind of referenced some other communities, kind of where we stand.
Mhm.
How do we look at this and say, where is North Andover? Are we in the middle? Are we rising to the top? I mean, how do we gauge kind of in the big, what you're doing? Where are we in this, Chris? And where, you know,
That's
kind of
kind
give
of a
me some
loaded
that.
question. I think I have an interesting philosophy on that.
Okay.
Because I think each community, there are some metrics, in some ways you can look at the state and sort of compare, but I think my experience has been each community is its own community and it cares about what it cares about. And its priorities are its priorities and it wants to be served. And I think my job was always to be, not to figure out how to make North Andover to be like the rest of the state, to make sure we're not behind and make sure we're using good standards, make sure that, but make sure North Andover is getting what they want for what they value and what they think is important. So there's a lot of variables. I mean, size, economic diversity, location, you know, et cetera. I mean, North End has challenges, and you know, I remember for years, I don't know if they still use the term of market basket, where you go out and try to find like towns for like towns.
Yes.
So you try to compare for size and
Comparability.
Comparability, and I remember for years, especially in IT, people would try to find out, you know, to be able to compare, but you know, the sort of validation and the equalizers weren't quite there. So you'd compare something, but you're
Chris used to be on the school committee, so
Yeah.
he knows all about
No,
comparability
that's
because it's
part
a
of the
big
reason
student
why I
market
People
asked
say,
thing.
well, what's your IT budget? You say, well, my IT budget's $1 million and mine's 50, but I
What are
really
your
don't have a
sco- what are your
centralized
scores
IT
versus my
budget because it's
scores?
still decentralized. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, again, personally, I have been impressed, having been in a range of communities, from some that are struggling and some that are sort of, you know, that North Andover, just as a professional organization, to have the capacity to make decisions, to have meeting. I mean, the one thing that impressed me more than anything was a one-night town meeting. Right, so if you ask me for a benchmark, that puts North Andover.
Wow. Chris, go to Boston Globe website, the Metro section, click on the North. There's actually an article on schools and computerizations and what different communities are doing and where they stand.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and in some cases, I came from a community where they were really pushing a one-to-one laptop initiative in the school, which I really wasn't supportive of. But I love what we've done here with the Chromebooks, and that's sort of inexpensive in the way they've not just given them a piece of hardware, but an infrastructure and an ideology and, you know, methodology behind it, because they're not teaching a technology, they're teaching concepts to your point about what happens when Google goes out of business. I mean, one of the challenges we face as a town, you know, it's no secret that we, you know, steer toward an older demographic in some of our employees and people that have been working with this, you know, same product for a while. And this concept, and in this one of the big pitches with Google, is it's not email, it's Outlook, right? So it's not this concept of an inbox versus these are concepts where kids growing up today, you could swap them out a new email program every week and they'd be fine because they know the concepts of what's an inbox and what's a reply and what's a reply all and this, and if the button's here versus here, they're gonna be fine. But if someone's been pushing 3 inches to the right for 30 years and all of a sudden it's 2 inches to the right, that's enough.
Don't talk about me like that.
That's enough to throw people. And so that is one of the challenges we have within some of these, you know, towns is we're dealing with some culture where we're trying to get people to understand concepts for things. I mean, quite honestly, there was an interesting thing on NPR I was hearing the other day. The concept of the password and how we all just grow up with 40 different passwords. But, you know, if you were at a certain age, it's a foreign concept that you have to remember passwords in this token, and it's like a sociological impact on it. So some of this stuff is kind of interesting. That's kind of a roundabout way to answer the question. Like anything, professionally, I think we're fine. I mean, from an IT standpoint, the right decisions have been made, the wheels aren't falling off, the mechanisms are there. There's a healthy budget. We're not fighting that fight that a lot of towns are fighting in terms of getting the funding. You know, we're not going around and it's there, and we're going to have those you know, discussions on the edges of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, but we're not dealing with, you know, problems. Now, that being said, there are problems with paper, and there are problems with other things that are really difficult problems that no one's really solved that we're going to dive in and see. But you know, in terms of our internet bandwidth and in terms of our capacity, and I'd put us up there, you know, with any city.
Have you ever had like any serious attacks into our network from hacking and data stolen?
No.
Students changing their grades?
Yeah. I'll use my favorite quote, which is a Greek quote. Our safety is in our anonymity.
Yes.
I mean, the reality is, and when I first came, we had a couple of big cyber attacks around the state, some pretty substantial ones that were pretty scary, and a lot of like the crypto stuff with the police departments. And you know, he asked me if we're doing everything I said. I said, yeah, but the scary thing is that still may not be enough because we live in a world where if somebody really wants something, they can go after it. So it's common sense stuff. It's low tech stuff. Good training. So one of the things we did this summer was we did a basic cybersecurity training for everybody. Because one of the easiest ways to hack a system is to call somebody up and get the username and password, or some other things. There's not hacking involved. Some of these attacks on the towns were so sophisticated where people were tailoring spam directly to a particular person for months in order to sort of glean. It's hard to protect against that stuff. Basic stuff like making sure users aren't local admins on their computer, having a segregated machine for banking, having, you know, good firewall and running Windows updates. If you look at a lot of the places where this happened, they had almost no IT staff or limited things. They weren't doing some of these basic stuff. So I will never say we're 100% safe. I'm totally humble and realize that we could have a really bad day. You know, we've been blacklisted on our email a few times because some, you know, spams or whatever went out, another place that Google hosts. But I think we're doing pretty well. We've not had a major thing, but it doesn't mean that that's something that couldn't happen to us in IT. That's one of the things that keeps you up at night. But
Yeah, quick question, going back to when Matt was trying to fit out the schools with routers and access points. Are you all set now at this point, Chris? Or?
I'll never say all set.
I know, because we were always, the budgeting for that kind of stuff was pretty consistent. And,
yeah, we have very good, and this town has very good overall wireless penetration.
Okay.
So you can go most places and get, and we've got both a private, a secure, and a sort of a public, you know, DMZ type public access. So it's pretty good. There are a few places there's issues, but for the most part, because that's super important with the Chromebooks in the school, and some of the curriculum that they access that, and that we're really strong. the discussion now is around really sort of the Hive controller technology around that, and what's the best way to manage that, you know, going forward in terms of, because once you get that many access points, the way you control them and manage them, and you know, there's some cool technology, there's sort of a Hive-based technology where it has a controller, but each Wi-Fi point sort of can act independently, and but that's really where the discussion is right now.
But as far as physical hardware, you're in pretty good shape
Yeah,
now?
we're in pretty good shape.
Okay.
So that Chromebook that happened last year, I guess?
Yeah.
For the schools,
Yeah.
that isn't, you're not gonna keep doing that?
The
Populate
school
more
will keep
schools with-
doing that as part of their hardware refresh within the schools.
So that doesn't fall under this?
No, it's not, that will be within their operating budget.
Got it.
Or
Thank
within
you.
their own capital discussion. I mean, that's really, and the nice thing with the Chromebook is the schools take advantage of the fact they are fairly homogeneous. So they've got a fixed set, they're able to have some, you know, some standards that we can't. And the Chromebooks are dirt cheap, and you can push them out, and then with Google, they can manage everything in the cloud. So it's a pretty good model, but I expect to see that to keep being refreshed.
The IMC
Yeah.
system, did you get other quotes besides TriTech?
Well, there's only, to be quite frank, there's only 2 games in town. There's PAMIT and there's IMC in Massachusetts. There are some other systems, and the problem is it's a sort of too hot, too cold system. There's some other systems that are way cheaper that don't even come close to matching the functionality of those 2 systems. And there are other systems that are way better that cost you $1 million. And it's on state contract, right? It's on state.
So it's
contract
already
as
been
well.
vetted and bid out?
Yeah.
Okay. The quote here was $208,875.
Mhm.
But I only have a couple pieces here that add up to $160,000.
No, there should be 3, no, 'cause trust me, we went through this, so.
I maybe just, you know, I'm looking at page 79, page 83,
And I will point out with the IMC, and again, I'm speaking as a representative for the public safety in this, there are one-time costs obviously associated with this, and there are some pretty steep costs around conversion, because this is a very proprietary business. So we're gonna be moving as much data as we can out of, you know, PAMIT and IMC if this goes through. Substantial training, you know, the cost of the software is relatively small, but when all's said and done, the annual cost for this whole package is less than what we're paying now. If we eliminate some third-party software, it's cheaper than what we're paying for more.
Tim, it's 3 components, I know, because we had a major discussion with me, IT, and the 2 chiefs, so I'm thinking that one of the components didn't get duplicated in the book.
It's okay, we got last year's sidewalk repair.
Cut and paste on.
Blame it on the top.
Lynn is very, she's doing 3 jobs at once right now. She lost staff. She lost 2 people off her staff in the last month.
But
so-
IMC is a local company, as is
No.
PAMIT, but.
TriTech?
Well,
They got a local
the
operation, but
story,
they're
the
actually out
story
of San Diego.
is, yeah, the story is IMC started as a local company.
Oh, okay.
TriTech bought them years ago, like 6, 7 years ago. They had a period where they went through some rocky times, and then sort of they were allowed to re-establish their local presence.
I did look at it, because it is a large contract you're getting here.
It's not enough for a plow, no. I thought the same thing, not enough for a plow.
No, but the glass door, a lot of employee gripes because of the acquisition
Right.
issues that they had, but
Right.
I'm sort of comfortable with what you've said so far about IMC, so.
Yeah, and I know, I actually have worked with, you know, Dennis Noah and the owners in a couple of towns. I know they lost a few contracts. They've regained every contract that they lost during that transitionary period, so. It's not a perfect program, it's dated in some ways, but this is one of those technology where it does what it's supposed to do. And it's sort of been vetted, so. And we've got a really solid, you know, dispatch and team here that, like any software, like with Munis, Munis is either the best software in the world or the worst software in the world, depending on how it goes. So
That's a good question, by the way. So did you involve other people in the decision process here for TriTech, or?
Yeah, and again, I came on the very tail end of this.
Uh-huh.
They've been looking at this for years. I think they were happy when they came and when he said, think about IMC, and I said, it's great, I've done it before, and it was sort of validating their own, but they had arrived at that conclusion over many, many years, generating from needs like things like, they have to have a separate program to do like shift and roll call, and it doesn't tie in, and like, IMC has a Munis plugin for payroll, and it does, it's sort of back to that idea of getting everything under one.
Because it was in last year's plan too,
Yep.
And I imagine just because of the
Yeah,
transition.
we whittled it down to more accuracy on the price. That's
And
why
it's-
I know that that was the correct price.
It's a big project.
Good. Any other?
Any other IT questions for Chris?
Great. Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
very
Thank you very
impressive.
Before that snowplow that Chris, like he's looking for takes effect.
Sure, make up for last year in reverse.
Right.
You look like you just came from a warm spot with that tan, so.
Should have seen him last week.
Andrew, by the way, texted me, sends his regrets, he's at a ZBA meeting.
Okay. Okay. So, the next topic, I'm gonna turn over to Don a little bit, and I'll give a little background, and then I'll turn it over. I was reading, early in the fall that the firefighters contract was renewed, and I was like, I remember something at town meeting about municipal contracts and so forth, so I did some research, and I looked back and we found that in 2010, the town meeting took a vote to, and I'll read you the exact quote, Article 25 from 2010, that said, procedure for funding of collective bargaining agreements, and it was passed by town meeting. Town meeting voted 91 to 62 to instruct the North Andover Finance Committee to request that the Board of Selectmen add a warrant article or articles to every annual town meeting, which will enable town meeting to approve or disapprove the funding of successor collective bargaining agreements settled and unfunded during the prior 12 months as specified under Mass General Laws, Chapter 158, Section 7B. Such warrant articles will provide for each contract to be voted on independently. So, I just wanted to kind of stop there and say, this has been passed, and I don't believe that these contracts have not shown up on the town meeting warrant.
No.
So, I did some research. I thought it was worth a discussion. Don was on the committee for part of that time when as that
Yeah,
policy.
just in time for town meeting.
Right, as that policy was kind of coming to fruition, so he's going to, kind of talk about what he discovered, in looking back through old minutes and talking to some of the folks who, from his relationship.
What their goals were.
And try to figure out what that's all about. This is not a discussion that will be finished tonight. I think it's a discussion that we're starting tonight, and I fully understand that this is. I think on one hand, we're a town, we provide labor services that are bound up by these contracts, and probably nothing is more important to our long-term fiscal health than making sure that whenever we, sign on the dotted line with a collective bargaining unit, that we make sure we have, something we can pay for over time, because that's, salaries are, if you look at the pie chart between salaries and benefits, that's where we spend our money, because we provide services that, humans provide. And those costs over time, we all know the story. The costs continue to go up at greater than the rate of inflation. So, that's the background around this was, where this article came from. So, I think we should discuss the history. I think we should think about it very carefully and, talk to, a number of people and think about it. Again, our role again is an advisory role where, it's clearly stated in the article that we can vote to ask the Board of Selectmen. We're not putting this on the warrant ourselves, and the Board of Selectmen can do with this what they would wish to do with it, which would be to take action or take no action, put it on the warrant or not put it on the warrant. But, and so, I think this is a discussion, an illuminative discussion that will, I imagine this is a discussion that will take like a month. This is not like a one-night type thing. So we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of it, and then we can, maybe come up with a few lines of inquiry to pursue over the next, few weeks.
Can we have copies of these minutes?
You're gonna get them in a minute.
Yeah.
We are, okay, in a minute.
In a minute.
Okay. I couldn't get them on the website.
They weren't
were
available on the website.
Conspicuously absent.
I had to go to clandestine
Ah,
ways of obtaining them
okay.
from former members of the FinCom.
Where's the IT guy when you need him?
He's gone. He just left.
And I think
I'll make this as a general statement. If committees do not submit their minutes,
Right.
we don't have them.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah, I know, but there's an audience at home that may think differently, so
No,
that's for their sake.
No, that's fair.
But what was available was just before, and then there was one missing after, and then, so it got kind of lost. So what I do have is, to put this in context, going back to 2009 of January. You know, 2008 wasn't a very good year, all right? 2009 was, you know, looking at budget cuts and everything else, and I think there was some, in my own personal opinion, there was some anxiety over contractual stuff where, you know, we were gonna do these municipal collective bargaining contracts, and they're gonna just keep marching on the way they were gonna keep marching on. And, you know, people maybe town couldn't afford that, you know, so they wanted more disclosure, okay? So I came on, I'm not sure whose term I filled out, but I came in just at the tail end of this, anyway. So the two meetings that were, you know, probably most important were January 22nd, 2009, and January 29th, 2009. Where they had the discussions were around the Mass General laws pertaining to this, and the fact that, you know, we weren't doing it and we should be doing it. And it eventually, just as an overview, went to town council, was present at the meeting, at these meetings, to take and come up with draft some verbiage that would go on as an article. And I think the selectmen actually were the ones that actually put the article on. I don't think FinCom could actually do it, so. All right, so it'd be probably worth it now, I'll pass these out. That's the 22nd meeting minutes, and this is the 29th meeting minutes. And you can read it and maybe get a flavor of what they were trying to get to. I'm still trying to figure it all out myself, but.
So here's how I imagine that the warrant article envisioned going. So here's what happens. We meet in May and we vote on a contract. We vote on the town budget. And within that town budget, out of those monies, we pay everybody. And most employees are under a collective bargaining agreement. Teachers, firefighters, et cetera, police officers, et cetera. And then, let's say, you know, those aren't cycled to go around or be approved by town meeting. They're negotiated with the superintendent and the school committee on the behalf of the schools, and then the town manager and the board of selectmen on the other side, and they get approved and sort of ratified, but not funded, because town meeting is the ultimate say on all you know, appropriations. And so basically what this would anticipate is that these articles would be, you know, the finance committee would say, you signed a contract, let's say, you know, but in between town meetings, you know. So let's say September you signed a contract with collective bargaining unit, and then so the next fiscal year contract is going to include the funding for that contract. So when you were preparing your budget, you would take out that contract and you would say, you know, everybody who I have, here's their new pay scale for the following fiscal year, and that's what we're going to put into our budget. And so, you know, what this warrant article says is basically, you know, since those are such, what it basically would say is, do you approve of the contract that was agreed between the town and the bargaining unit, and
The middle of the fiscal year.
right,
Yeah.
in the next fiscal year, and you're going to fund it? Because the town, I mean, the other options, I mean, the other option would be, if, you know, the town could refuse, you know, you could go to town meeting, and it has happened, and it happens in towns all the time, all over the Commonwealth and all over New England.
So we're not gonna pay it.
Where it's just, where they just say, we're not passing the budget, and then they have to reopen things, and kind of look and recut all these things. You know?
Especially if things are tight, yeah.
But by law,
Right.
you have to disclose, is that the point?
Well, the contracts are public records, so every single contract that gets agreed is a public record.
Got it.
You know, personnel records are not, but the general idea, you know,
Yeah.
The general contracts are out there.
So let me get this straight again. So any municipal contract agreement passed during the middle between town meeting periods is for the forthcoming fiscal year. Does it so state that this contract is subject to town meeting vote or blah, 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 or am I wrong on that assumption that it doesn't start on July 1, it starts January 1? I mean, do we have any contracts that are funded, that are being applied or being used or whatever in the middle of the year?
Yeah, you can have one, well, you can be out of contract, okay, and you have to, what happens is you can have years where you can go for little years without the contract, so continue as is, and so you can have a negotiation that says, okay, going ahead, X, but we're also gonna take care of
Retroactive.
retroactive.
But that's still the current funded year, though. It's not going
Well, it's
backwards.
previous year.
It's associated with previous year. You can't go back into prior years, can you?
It's associated
No,
with.
a prior year does require town meeting approval.
But I'm
A
just saying,
prior
the
fiscal year.
scope of what it can cover though.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying where the money actually comes from, which year it
Yes,
comes from.
yes.
It's
Well,
gonna be in the current
firefighters
year.
in Boston, how long do they go without a contract?
Right, and they're not opening up prior years to fund them. They're just basically
Right.
taking out of the current year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That's all I was saying. But do we have any contracts that start in the middle of the year?
We don't know. I don't know.
Contracts all start on July first.
They all start July
But Chris is right, you may
I'll tell you,
enter into a
this is
fiscal
another
year.
issue that's
I'm fine.
And a firefighter, the firefighters are a prime example. Their previous contract ended June 30th of 2015. Their new contract was not negotiated, was not ratified, settled and ratified till September. So 3.5 months, 4 months into the new fiscal year. So they, in essence, were, to use Chris's term, 4 months out of contract.
But they're being paid under the new contract right now, right?
Correct.
So that,
And-
I'm
and-
sure Andrew put the money in there for the budget and all that
Yes,
stuff.
I was just about to say,
number.
we have a sense of what it's going to be, because we try to be consistent. So there were salary reserve items
Right.
in the budget that equated to the percentage that was actually settled.
So I'm kind of confused by this article.
Well, I think it's a procedure thing, probably a town meeting. You know, back to Chris's point was that, we have the fastest town meeting in the state or something, right? Well, it
not
starts
quite,
off with an
Not quite, but
omnibus.
close.
We're gonna beat the record coming up.
Well, the first thing we say, we're gonna pass this as an omnibus, all of it, right? Bang.
Yeah.
So now we're not breaking anything out, right? I mean, unless somebody gets up and says, I wanna, make a motion that we're gonna break out this item.
That's the town moderator's choosing.
Yes, so I think what's happened is that the idea was this transparency stuff that was wanted, but then when you get to the procedure of the town meeting, it's kind of all wrapped up in the omnibus, am I right?
The town moderator the last couple of years does lump or repetitive articles or
Right,
irregular
right,
annual
right.
articles as one vote.
Yeah, so whether, now because of that, we're overlooking an approved article, or, maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, did this come out of some of the, there were issues, I don't remember what years they were about. Do you see what they did in that contract? And some people were complaining, it's past, it's really history, but.
You see, we have such a good town manager now that,
Well,
as I say, I'm the boring government and just basically
Yeah. Right.
everything gets all lumped up into one
No, I think
thing.
things have been
And
very
after
smooth
that,
over the past couple of years. I
Yeah.
know that, one controversial thing that was like right before the bottom fell out, the school committee signed a contract after a few years without a contract that had some increases. And so at the time, people were like, boy, I wish I could take that one back. And,
that's probably the one thing.
If I can make 2 points, I'll address point number 2 first. School contracts wouldn't come under this anyways because of the education reform law of whatever year, Chris, it was. Yeah.
I'm a little, I'd have to go back and.
Yeah, so basically, a school budget is a lump number that
Right.
you vote.
Yeah.
What they do,
They can
not
move
saying
it around.
not saying they do this, so let's make that clear. They can itemize that $40 million, and then as soon as it's approved,
It goes wherever they want.
wherever they go. So you that authority isn't under. The pre-dawn joining the committee, there was a particular member who interpreted the statute as saying no contract was valid unless it's approved by town meeting.
Right, yeah,
And
that's in the minutes.
right.
Yeah.
So see, my memory's not bad for an old man. And so a legal opinion was yeah and no, that's not really true and all that sort of stuff. So that's why the article in its final form, as Don read, was sort of a recommendation as opposed to an edict, because the statute wasn't as strict of an interpretation as the former Finance Committee member wanted it to be or interpreted it to be. And that's why it's a recommendation kind of thing.
So what's the detail that needs to be disclosed? I mean, is it just,
Like,
hey, there's a contract
It's the fund-
negotiated,
make
that's
sure
it,
that the
or
funding is there, right?
percentages
I mean,
and changes
I've
in
only-
benefits? I mean,
There's only
how
been
much-
there's only been one contract that I saw that made it on a town meeting warrant, and it was a contract with the firefighters union approved through
Because it was
arbitration.
a prior fiscal year.
And basically it just gave the increases, you
Right.
know, one, you know, to the basic, you know, system.
Like
So-
percentages?
Yeah, percent.
Well,
like
because
two,
the
three,
statute
four.
in that case, which is binding arbitration, basically said if it covers a previous fiscal year, the whatever body, the legislative body, has to approve the funding. And that's similar to, you know, you said the firefighters, that probably, I think was an issue with Boston Police a couple of years ago, with some of the
Right.
council wasn't going to approve an arbitrator's decision.
So now what do we do?
I mean, is it actually in the best interest of a town to disclose all that and vote on it? I mean, if you vote on a 5% increase, well, then they
Let
get a
me-
5% increase.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
there's
it's
no
probably-
I mean,
negotiation.
part of the problem that was
So,
discussed
oh.
back then was negotiations are not a public record
Right.
until the contract is ratified. So that's why the selectmen may discuss contract elements in executive session, but they have to vote it in open session. And then the minutes of the executive sessions get released.
Released, yeah.
Well, one of the concerns, if I remember, Don, help me out here, was, are you negotiating this contract now in front of town meeting?
Right.
Okay? I don't like the fact that, well, back then, it was 80 or 90% health insurance. I don't like the fact that you give this group 90% health insurance, because I have to pay 50-50. So, a town meeting does not have the authority to negotiate a contract. So
Just to
now you'd
fund-
be getting.
Just to fund it.
Right, now you'd be getting into the details. And a lot of times, for those of you who have done it or have been involved, you don't negotiate a piece by piece, it's really a body. You know, so I may give you a little here to get some, you know, verbiage that isn't under the authority of a funding mechanism, so
Take away
it's a
some
give and take.
overtime or,
Right.
yeah.
Right, so one of the concerns was, are we now negotiating on town meeting floor? And who can get the bigger turnout to say no versus yes and all that sort of stuff? And again, because the statute was legally interpreted in a different vein, I go back to that's why it's a recommendation or an instruction to the selectmen as opposed to
yeah.
a mandate.
Right.
So the question I have for this group is if we get that information on the contracts, do we say, yeah, this is a good package, and not make that recommendation to the selectmen? Or vice versa, if we say, this is full of it. I don't know who negotiates this thing, but they have certainly.
Hey, I have feelings.
Theoretically. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then do we go and say, we do want the selectmen to put this thing on there, and we start using whatever little bit of, not even much of anything, but
So
just,
you're viewing this as a tool?
yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, town
I mean,
meeting.
do we use it arbitrarily, do we use it deliberately, not arbitrarily, but deliberately,
Right.
depending on how we
Yeah.
feel about the contract?
See, I mean,
Deliberately,
yeah,
deceptively.
and I think it's an interesting thing too, because it's a recommendation, there's a warrant article, and then the warrant article, you know, if it has a financial impact, we would, you know, recommend, we would take a vote and recommend or not recommend, you know. pass.
And one of the philosophies is you already get that ability because we do include it in the
Well,
operating budget.
I agree with you there.
Right.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's under
We-
salary reserves of each
Right, but
department,
it's very, if a contract is not settled, for instance, the police contract was settled in last fiscal year.
Yeah.
So everything was clean in the budget. So who got what was already itemized in the budget. The fire department was not settled, so we can't, well, we can predict, but we can't accurately predict what is going to happen. So
Financial.
that amount is in a salary reserve item. So I would venture to say that it's still under the auspices of the finance committee and town meeting to
So it
delete
doesn't-
or amend that particular line item.
In the budget.
Correct.
Right.
So it is there.
Or bring it
It's
out as
just not-
something else.
It's just not in the format of a distinct
Right.
article.
Right.
So, but I think Thomas also brings up a fair point, and being involved in several negotiations. You know, remember, we as a FinCom, yes, it's about the dollars, but it's also the value for those dollars, right? It's not just get the cheapest, you know, it's not, there are a whole bunch of other considerations. And so, again, since this is only the first part of our discussion, I can tell you there was a whole bunch of these contracts that was beyond the X percent. It was rules, it was stipends, it was overtime, it was all these.
It was steps and columns.
There's
Right.
all kinds of other pieces that number does not represent. And so that's the other part that, you know, as we're weighing this, you have to think about, those are the other pieces. If we're trying to use this as a way to create transparency, you know, where are we forced to stop with that?
Yeah.
Where does it become negotiation? You know, these are real considerations, because that percentage thing, that's easy. It's
Right.
honestly, a lot of these,
It's the package.
it's the package,
The
it's all those
package
other.
you're saying is opaque.
Sometimes.
Well,
Multifaceted.
Percentage.
I think multifaceted is a better word than opaque. But I also have seen some elements of it that you know a cost one way, you know, it's not direct. You know, so for example, if you get like
Some contracts, you might add an education component that all of a
Right.
sudden
Right.
you'll allocate up to $15,000 or $20,000 for special training or something.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's not part of the percentage, but it's still part of the package and sort of
It can
a
carry
a
on.
working condition
And there's some
kind of clause.
obligation,
But
right?
there's
Correct.
got to be a way to evaluate each and every one of those.
That's a sander, Chris, it's not a plow.
I forget when the teacher's contract was being negotiated. Probably my first year, and I was this crazy one that volunteered to attend those meetings.
Yeah.
And I had an idea, not quite an epiphany, but I approached Stan, maybe Brian, and I said, you know, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a member of the finance committee as part of the negotiating team? Because we do have that watchdog
Yeah.
responsibility. And to say, like I'm talking about now, let's look at the contract after the fact
Yeah.
and not see all this stuff is
Right.
crazy.
You have a
Whereas-
watchdog responsibility, but there's no statutory responsibility.
Right.
But the watchdog responsibility is critically important to the town.
Uh-huh.
So therefore, that was an idea, and I was really saying, no, you can't do that because of whatever rules and negotiations and
Right.
whatnot. I still think it's a good idea, I just don't know if we can push that one.
Yeah.
See,
No, I mean, I think there are general principles. Like sometimes some towns have had sort of like they used to call it in teaching. It was the Lexington plan. It was like, we'll throw you $5,000 a year for the last 3 years of your career because you collect 80% of that $5,000 a year for the rest of your, you know, for
Right.
the rest of the time you're on this earth. The teacher retires early. The town replaces a $60,000 employee with a $30,000 employee. And that's 30. You know.
And I'll give you another
That's-
example, a number,
that's like that.
I don't know if this is when you were around, but, you know, a number of years ago, and I actually have a summary sheet that shows you every union, school and municipal, and non-union school and municipal, what raises or major changes were made in contracts over the last 15 years. I have a big spreadsheet that goes fiscal year by fiscal year. But I'll give you an example. One contract, one group will show 0, 0, and 0. But what they did is the group was given a new max step,
Right.
which equated to almost 4 to 6% each year. But if I look at just the salary increase, which is, you know,
Yeah.
just a single thing, they took a 0. We're great.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, that's why it's the entire package. And when we voted, when the selectmen vote, the entire MOA becomes part of the public record. Because you know, one of the negotiating strategies that I like, because it works well, is going off the record. Because off the record, each party can become more honest and open rather than doing the natural dance. That's part of negotiation. And on the municipal side, it's equally important because police and fire have the binding arbitration. So anything that is said on the record can be used by the arbiter in reaching a decision. So, for instance, if you see the MOA that was presented to the selectmen October, whenever it was, on on the firefighters, it will actually say, this is an off-the-record document unless and until it's ratified by both parties. So, then the whole document is public, once it's ratified.
Have we used this article at all? Any recollection?
No.
I've not-
No, it was, again, one particular finance committee member at the time
Yeah.
that pushed it.
Interesting.
There's no reason to break it out separately in the budget or, you know.
Again, I believe we do.
Yeah, it's there.
Our viewpoint is we do because it's all there.
It's there under the reserves, but.
Right.
But it's
Well,
not-
for an unsettled contract, it's under reserve, but for a settled contract,
It's in the budget.
it's already in the budget.
Yeah.
But in what detail?
It isn't.
It's
It's
not,
just a
it's not.
percentage.
No,
Well,
it's not even.
It's not because
Yeah.
you see in the budget all of the other bells and whistles financials too. So for instance, with longevity's increased, you see the longevity
You see the
increase.
longevity, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a stipend is added, you see that stipend under the stipend line. So you see all the bells and whistles that,
It's just not all in one.
it's not all in one location,
You have to
unless
go-
you all of a sudden have the, if you're looking at the fire department budget when you get it, if you have their MOA in one hand and their budget in the other hand, then you can kind of match the columns and see where the changes are. But just looking at each document in and of itself, no, that's not,
So if
but
we're
it's all
trying to
there.
create transparency by this exercise.
Just putting out the number. Yeah.
Yes, perhaps assembling maybe just a guide to the pages where all of the other figures are, or pull it all together with footnotes. on that
But again, with all due
particular
respect, Karen,
line. Yeah.
Most of
I'm
the
not saying this is what I
ordinary
do, but
citizens are gonna be
theoretically, I'll use somebody else. Theoretically or hypothetically, I
Yeah.
may give you
Well,
an
it's
extra
me.
$200 in a stipend, but what I got back is a change in working condition. I'll use the police department here as they probably got something, but their 8-hour shift became an 8.5-hour shift without overtime for that 15 minutes before and that 15 minutes later. Okay?
Mhm.
You're not gonna see that in a spreadsheet that I saved
Yeah.
half an hour each day for 30 some odd people on overtime because it's a give and take.
Yeah.
So
Those are those-
I got something, I got the half hour of free time,
Yep.
as some refer to it, but I had to give something back. So you may only be looking at the monetary number I gave back, but you don't see my savings or my change in working conditions that I've now covered overlaps.
Well, that ought to be
Or
linked.
efficiencies.
But it can't, because I don't come off duty at 8 at 7:59 and you come on at 8 now. I come on duty at 7:45 and you stay till 8:15. So there's a half-hour overlap, which is crucial in a police department.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's not something that I can put a dollar amount on or a percentage amount on, but it's part of collective bargaining and an overall contract package.
Oh, okay, you can't get it down to the last, niggle, but,
But my
like
point
that.
is, you may look at that particular contract and go, why'd you give them an extra 0.5%?
No, I mean, I think there's obviously ways to analyze different contracts.
Yeah.
You can look at the mean, median, you can look at the median, you can look at the mode, you can look at the 5th percentile, the 10th percentile, you can look at kind of people's progressions over time. There are like 6 ways to Sunday that you can analyze these things. And at the end, really, it all comes down to how much did the pot of money for the same pool of labor services change year over year, right? Like, because that's what it's all about. You've got your pot, you've got your pot of money, just pretty much within a few tenths.
Yeah, when the town manager announces his whatever it's called, my mind
5-year
just blanked out.
forecast.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
And says X department is going to get 3.75% increase. Any negotiated salary increases or collective bargaining increases is part of that 3.75. It's not
Right.
above and beyond.
Right.
And here's one just practical thing. I noticed that an effort is being made during the negotiations with these various unions. Some pressure, I think, is being put on for the union to be reasonable and see the light. And I think that has,
That's your personal comment, right?
And that has produced, I think,
Because
some
that's not,
results.
that's not a town position that we.
I know it's not a
No.
position.
Yeah.
This is my theme.
Okay.
If you might want to say. But, I mean, I think we're doing, on the town side, our job, which is
I like to think so.
to just not go lockstep, but to help people come along the way. People are looking at what's in the newspapers with other school systems and with these, in other municipalities, with the labor contracts and the court cases that are coming out. It is a moving ball of wax.
Right.
And you've heard the town manager over and over, and I don't have his exact phrase, sustainability. The decisions we make today, and I'm paraphrasing, have to carry us on. So to give away the store today is great today, but if I can't sustain it tomorrow and the next year and the following year, it don't mean diddly. You know, if I've gotta give you 4% this year, but now I'm laying half of you off next year, that's not sustainability.
So that's the other, I think that's the other part that, if you think about how it's negotiated, it's ultimately the dollars are meaningless, it's the service that we're really focused on. What are we getting for that? So, and what I mean by that is, maybe another thing to throw into the conversation here is, whoever negotiates that contract actually ends up representing the municipality. There is a executive summary, there's a cliff notes to, in essence, what transpired in that contract, right? That summarizes some of these steps. And so I guess I would throw into the discussion here as we weigh this, you know, we're weighing this because we're thinking about transparency. Is there another way to get this transparency? I don't know. But again, if once that's negotiated, there is a way to capsulize some of these pieces that talks about the trade-offs, because ultimately that committee, when you're involving all the other members to vote, in essence you have to convey that to them. You have to sit down and say, those of you that are on this committee that are responsible for voting up and down, you weren't negotiating this, but here's how we came to this decision. Here were the key components of it, because you have to convey that to the rest of the committee. Maybe that's another way to approach it. So, you know, again, for the food for more consideration.
Right. And I mean, I think there's some things, you know, there's some things to think about too. Like, you don't want to make changes that increase our pension liabilities.
Right.
Because we know our pension system is, you know, underfunded.
Yep.
And so you want to be careful that, you know, you don't promise, you don't kick the obligation down the road because it's still coming due, just with interest, you know, to the taxpayers later on down the
But wouldn't that be our responsibility to ask these questions in these sessions and then make our recommendation instead of, you know, disclosing every detail of
Well, I mean,
what's coming down?
Yeah,
the
I mean,
road
every
in the
detail
town
is-
meeting,
I think-
which nobody understands anyway in the town
Right.
meeting. I
Right.
think it's very emotional, and you know,
It
why
is.
does he get 3%? I only got 2%, so I'm voted down here.
Right.
And it makes
No,
no
you're right.
sense,
It's, you know, it's not, you know, I think it's not a forum for negotiation. And it is a fine line over how much transparency do you have versus how much agency do you have to be able to negotiate a flexible agreement, you know? I mean, I think.
I like the path you're all going on, and maybe the idea here, and piggybacking off what Chris just said, is to somehow we take a look, I wrote down, check out the fire contract. It is public record right now, right?
It's on the website.
Just check it out, and maybe we put 3 sentences in our letter to the town, talking about it. And if they choose to want to see more detail, then the information's out there in public record. But to actually say, hey, this is what the town negotiated in front of town meeting, we'll be there for a long time, folks.
Potentially.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean,
In
I-
certain
I
years,
agree.
more than potentially.
But that's it, that we're here as a watchdog. And so that we would like to have more information and get involved to a certain extent, but we probably don't want to take it all the way to town meeting to be examining the whole contract.
Yep.
So, yeah, I agree too. Let's see how
And
we do
again,
it.
once
Look at one contract.
the meeting that they ratify an agreement, that gets posted, because it's part of the minutes. And then as soon as the contract is signed, we post that too. We remove the old one and we put the new one on the website.
But that's the thing, I don't think it's something that we have all, put in our process to review in the past.
No, I understand.
So that's why we
No, I understand.
especially do it.
Auditor's footnote.
That's right, financial footnote.
Yep, okay.
I mean, in a sense, we did actually, like, when we go through the budgets, we always looked at the personal budget, and we always asked,
We do.
How many, what's the percentage increase overall, and that's somewhere
Exactly,
range. And-
yeah.
But
But
it's not-
John's point, if it,
That's
if it,
as
in the
far as-
fire department, you saw it as a lump sum under the salary reserve because there wasn't a settled contract.
Right, but you
Right.
still had a year-over-year percentage.
Oh,
and
yes,
that- And it was
correct.
somewhat reasonable,
Right.
so
Right.
we didn't see 8, 9, 10% increases. It
But
was
it's not the
more
whole
in a-
story either, Thomas, because they could've got something else too that it's buried someplace.
But then
Well, it's,
we
but
saw-
if
but
it's
then we see the
financial,
overall-
no, but,
But
no,
we see
that's
the
not,
overall
that's not
budget.
correct, because if it's financial, it's in the budget.
Uh-huh.
Okay, a change in working conditions or something else might not be, but any dollar amount is in that budget, and as Thomas said, you see the year-to-year comparison.
Okay.
Do you guys run these through, will you take a contractor over to the Essex retirement system and said,
Nope.
tell me actuarially what this
Nope.
does? No?
No, but I think that's a good point. The impact on the pension liability, I think that is maybe, I'm not so concerned about these, increases in the
The
payout,
expense side.
in the cash,
Yeah.
on the cash side.
Right, if it's in and out in the same year,
It's
you
paid
know,
for.
It's
or
there.
if it's not in and out the same year, are you accruing for it,
No,
Because
we-
if I were sitting in that pension chair, I would say,
You did
wait a second, you guys can negotiate this into the contract in such a way that I end up, I have a
Well,
bigger
there
outflow.
are a number of things you cannot legally put as pensionable.
Yeah,
So, like, for instance, clothing allowances are
Right.
not pensionable.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what the town says.
There's a whole
And a
exclusion,
number
yeah.
of years ago, contrary to what you just said, the retirement board voted to give dispatchers Group 2 status. And we said, no, that's the town's decision to negotiate Group 2 status. So Group 2 status is basically that you can retire sooner rather than later versus Group 1 status or police and fire a Group 4 status.
Right.
So we actually told the retirement board at the time, no, you don't have that authority to tell our people their Group 2 status.
Right.
That's something that we negotiate and we have no intention of doing so.
right.
And
And
that
listen,
was-
I'm not.
No, I
I'm
just was
a
using
total
that as,
hypothetical
I was just
to say,
using that
like-
as, this is a real scenario that.
But that's gonna put a big
But that was
impact
just
on
an-
pension, right?
That's correct, so that's an
Yeah.
example of how it worked in reverse.
Right.
Did they have did the retirement board just have this habit of?
Don't know and don't
usurping
care.
that? Okay.
Did-
But
Don't
you
know,
just-
don't know and didn't care.
Didn't
It's probably the
care.
political side of the retirement board.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they always are. I
Called
mean-
lobbying.
The
Yeah.
lobbying and political side.
And it's just, it's better now. I mean,
Thank you.
the story that Andrew told was a great story because, all over the country, I worked in the financial industry and I would hear stories of Plumbers Local 23 in Oklahoma City sitting down across the table from Bear Stearns for what should I buy with my pension fund? Which, and some of them totally blew up.
Some of them invested in Vegas.
Like yours, right?
My pension, yeah,
Yeah.
it was the typographical union.
But just remember, the key in the last 4 years has been the term sustainability.
Right.
We're not negotiating and settling a contract that isn't sustainable.
Right.
Fully vested, maybe $15 a month or something I'll get.
Oh, no.
That's it, but they keep warning me there's not enough reserves and
To get, to maintain
not enough old
$50.
printers are dying,
Don't expect the $50 per
Hey, different real quick.
Yep.
Could you ask Andrew for an analysis comparing 15 and 16's capital budgets to what has been spent?
Sure.
An example came out tonight
Yep,
that,
yep.
what's
What's left over.
Yeah,
and
what's
so-
left
yep.
over, because
Yeah.
I'd like to see.
I know Lynn already does that, so that's easy to do.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Nice.
Just so we know what is being
Yeah,
usable.
16 might be a little, because of the time,
16 's
because
not done
we're in
yet.
the middle of
Right.
16, we're only 6 months into 16.
We sort of talked about it a little bit, but she said her system's
Yeah.
quite up to speed as far as
We
reporting.
will
goes,
definitely,
but-
we definitely have it for 15, but 16 might be a little distorted because we still have 5.5 months to go.
Yeah, and anything could happen there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll definitely get you that for 15.
coffee cans.
These are coffee cans?
Coffee cans.
Yeah, okay.
That was, Bob,
Yeah.
yeah.
Novello.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Novito.
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 Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
There we go, there's a motion. Thank you.
I actually.
Okay,
you all.
he told
Pick
us.
this up
All
again
right.
next week.
Thank you.